Time to get your collar pressed. Time to get yourself all dressed. Time to get your shiny dance shoes on, 'cause everybody's jumping at Jack's. All the kids are coming down just to dig the swinging sound. You can hear the band from miles away, 'cause everybody's jumping at Jack's. Here's a little well-known secret, sure as there's the sky above.
Nothing could be any sweeter
than dancing with the one you love. When life is like a sour note, here's a happy antidote. Come to where the party never ends, 'cause everybody's jumping at Jack's.
Hey everybody, welcome to Campus Jax. It's great to have you with us tonight. It's a very special night. Now, here at Campus Jax, we have live music right here on this stage every night of the week, except Mondays we're closed. But every other night there's something going on, so I'd invite you and those of you who are watching online, check out our lineup at campusjax.com. You'll see all the shows. I think we're scheduled. Love that music, because everything's jumping at Jax right here. Anyway, you can see everything coming up to the end of the year at campusjax.com. Thursday nights, we've got Steamer's Jazz at Jax, which is, this is kind of a special edition of Steamers here tonight. It's categorically, we're right in the right zone. Now, for those of you who are here for the first time, who is that? Who's here to see, because Jonathan Stout and his amazing band are here? And not only are they here just to, so I got a sneak listen already, and it's pretty going to be fantastic. But we have a special celebration, a birthday celebration. And, unfortunately, Charlie Christian couldn't be with us here tonight, but we're going to remember him. And this is going to be an amazing story that's going to unfold with us tonight. So anyway, take it away, Jonathan Stout and the entire band.
hello and welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming out. My name is Jonathan Stout, and these are the various members of both the Campus 5 and Grand Slam Sextet that I usually lead. And we're doing this very special thing, celebrating the birthday of the great Charlie Christian. We try to celebrate it on July 29th every year, but sometimes, you know, you have to wait a couple of days. But anybody that's ever had a birthday probably knows what it's like to have to wait till the weekend to celebrate. But that song we just played is called Flying Home, one of the all-time great swing songs of all time. And that was something that came live over the air from Los Angeles in August 1939, and literally overnight started an electric guitar revolution. It was so popular that instantly, 2 weeks later, they'd gotten so many requests, they had to repeat it and play it live again over the air, and they hadn't even gone into the studio to record it yet or put out a 78 of it yet. At this point, in 1939, electric guitar was a novelty. It was a weird kind of experimental instrument. There had only been a few jazz musicians who'd tried to use it, and they were fine. They're great. I mean, George Barnes rules, but he didn't get enough credit at the time. But like, when people heard Charlie Christian on the radio, they were knocked out. And every band, all of a sudden, overnight, had to get an electric guitar player. Artie Shaw has one in his Gramercy 5. Jimmy Lunsford's band has one by 1941. Erskine Hawkins has one by 1941. It was a massive sea change. But the thing that's crazy about the Charlie Christian revolution is that Charlie only had a recording career that lasted less than 2 years before his life was cut short by tuberculosis. So a very Jimi Hendrix-like figure in this like short career, huge revolutionary impact, and then whammo. That song that you just heard was originally broadcast on a Saturday night. The way that Charlie Christian came to public notice is he became a member of the Benny Goodman Sextet. And that started like a week before that. This record producer, John Hammond, who is famous for, we'll use the word discover a little bit loosely, but he is responsible for discovering or making known people like Billie Holiday, Count Basie, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen. He produced records for Aretha Franklin, Stevie Ray Vaughan, like one of the most impactful record executives of all time. He had heard about Charlie from Mary Lou Williams, the piano player in Andy Kirk's band, and basically John Hammond got in his car, drove to Oklahoma City, heard Charlie on a Saturday night. Monday morning, he put Charlie on a train to come out to Los Angeles to meet Benny Goodman and audition for his band. Charlie arrived on a Wednesday. And there's a very funny story about the fact that they were at the recording studio. Benny didn't really have time to like deal with this new person. He didn't even give him a chance to plug in his guitar, and he just sort of jammed a little bit with him, with Charlie accompanying him, missing the fact that this is one of the great swing era soloists of all time. Kind of blows him off. Now, the guys in the band got wind of this, and they said, that's not cool. So they snuck him on stage at the Victor Hugo restaurant in Beverly Hills that night. This is Wednesday night. Benny is like, who's this guy on my stage? What's the deal? He calls a tune that he thinks that Charlie won't know. And of course, when he goes to let Charlie solo, Charlie does know it and plays so amazingly that John Hammond said the song went on for 47 minutes. You're all welcome. I am not going to play this next song for 47 minutes. But this was something that they actually recorded on their first recording session together, because Benny was so blown away by Charlie Christian that he immediately added him to the band. So that was Wednesday. Saturday night, they're playing Flying Home live from Los Angeles. Exactly that arrangement that you just heard. And what's crazy is, not only did Charlie revolutionize the electric guitar, but that song is something that, although he wasn't credited for it, he almost certainly wrote. People have said that they heard him playing that back in Oklahoma City, and the fact that like he joins the band and 3 days later they have this song that has a melody, it has background riffs, it has a shout chorus that's different. These are things he came back with in his saddlebags and was like, here, and I've got tunes. So Charlie's impact is pretty revolutionary, from just the fact that he plugged in to the solos he played, to the songs that he wrote that are just part of the DNA of swing and that turn into things like R&B and rock and roll. That's why we're here. That's why we're celebrating the music of Charlie Christian. So, to that end, here's the song that Benny tried to stump Charlie with on that audition on that Wednesday night, and it's something they recorded on their first recording session together. This is called Rose Room. All right, so that was called Rose Room, and of course it was silly of Benny to think that Charlie wouldn't know that. It was a popular tune, but that's how the stories about people like Charlie Christian go. The myths become larger than the legend, and so I want to shout out Dr. Wayne Goines, who is a professor in the Midwest and who wrote the definitive Charlie Christian biography, which only recently came to my attention because there's so much myth about Charlie, and his book is fantastic. I highly recommend getting it because it really explains where Charlie came from, how he got there, and dispels with a lot of the myths. Charlie was born in Bonham, Texas, and his father was a musician, but like a lot of African-American people at the time, they were domestic servants also. And at early in Charlie's life, Charlie's father went blind. And because of that, they moved to Oklahoma City, where Charlie would grow up, to be with family. And they did, even though Charlie's father had gone blind, they still did play music in the family, and they played, almost all of them played a variety of instruments. And his brother Edward, who was a little bit older, became a band leader also. Charlie gravitated toward the guitar as a teenager, and at this time, there really wasn't electric guitar yet. So as electricity was starting to become a thing that people were using for sound, and now there were microphones and kind of prototypical PA systems on stage, he was experimenting with like playing with the microphones sitting on his lap while he would play. And it wasn't until 1936 when Gibson introduced this model of guitar that it really made it possible for somebody to play electric guitar for real. And they'd introduced like steel guitars that were successful, and a lot of the Western cats had adopted them. And they had created pickups you could clamp onto an acoustic guitar. And actually, Leon McAuliffe from Bob Wills's band recorded the first Western or jazz guitar solo in 1935. So, like I said, it wasn't unheard of, but it hadn't caught the public imagination. And when people heard Flying Home, immediately they went nuts and they started loving it. And this next song that we're going to play, again, shows the potential of what Charlie was able to do with this electric guitar. One of the things about an electric guitar is that it doesn't sound like an acoustic guitar, just louder, because it sounds like a really crummy acoustic guitar. But it sounds a lot like a tenor saxophone, so it sounds like a really good electric guitar. And it's got this big, fat, sustainy sound that if you're trying to make it sound like an acoustic isn't quite right, but this is what he can do with it. So we're going to play another one of the tunes that wasn't credited to Charlie at the time, but was, again, certainly one of his compositions, and this is called 7 Come 11. So for our next tune, I wanted to demonstrate just how ahead of time Charlie was in predicting the future of popular music in America. This song was recorded late in 1939. So Charlie joins the band in August, and by October, they've recorded 2 sessions. He's played at Carnegie Hall and is touring with Benny Goodman all over. They will return just after this is recorded again to Carnegie Hall for the second of John Hammond's famous Spirituals to Swing concerts, which were sort of one of the first times anybody had tried to encapsulate a concert that would tell the whole story of the history of jazz. And Charlie was a big part of that concert, and he jammed with the Basie band while he was there. But what's crazy is Charlie has this odd dual role. He's credited as being one of the fathers of bebop. And on that last song, when Charlie would go into the bridge, he would start to play these chordal linear things that sound kind of like bebop. But the rest of his solos would often be this very like riffy, rhythmic swing vocabulary. So he was kind of had his feet in both worlds. And I think when people celebrate him merely as one of the fathers of bebop, they're forgetting like, oh, but he was also a killin' swing guitar player. And all of the people that ended up inventing jump blues and R&B and the things that turned into rock and roll, they all were loving that other part of his playing. And then to only celebrate the kind of like, you know, Chuck Berry before there was a Chuck Berry-ness of it, misses out on this cool bebop thing that he was starting to do. So I love to celebrate both halves, AC and DC, country and Western. But this song is called Shivers, and it's just sort of a little bit of a contrafact of I Never Knew. But this has this kind of like blues bent note thing that was, you know, a big part of acoustic blues. But this is the first time you hear an electric guitar with like a tube amp kind of playing these crunchy notes. And forgive me if you heard me say this on an Instagram post or maybe on something else. But no disrespect to Marty McFly, but like this is where Chuck Berry was getting it. And he said as much. Like he was very much influenced by Charlie Christian, and then the guy whose name I'm forgetting, but was a big Charlie Christian fan, but he played with Louis Jordan and his Timpani Five. So basically that lineage of Charlie and people influenced by Charlie are the things that lead into B.B. King and Chuck Berry and all the stuff that turns into rock and roll. So I'll just say that I guess the fact that I learned to play because I wanted to play like Metallica, I still have Charlie Christian to thank at the beginning of that. So let's play Shivers. So this is from December 1939, and here's the tune Shivers. By the way, real quick, this band, we need to introduce this band. This is Miles Prower Davis on the clarinet, Craig Fundiga at the vibraphone, Christopher Dawson on the piano, Riley Baker on the big bass, the triple threat himself, and of course, the one and only Josh Colazzo on drums. We'll talk more about this in a second, but one of the other things about the Benny Goodman Sextet that's worth noting is that like it was made up of all-stars, and I'm lucky enough to get to have all-stars on stage with me tonight. So thank you, cats, for being here. And now we play Shivers. The Shivers. So, it's worth noting that the Benny Goodman Sextet was the third version of Benny Goodman having a small group band. And the story of why he has a small group band, in short, is racism. Because of the racism of the time, if he wanted to play with black musicians, there were plenty of venues that would not allow him to do that. And he had played with Lester Young and Billie Holiday on a Teddy Wilson-led session with Billie Holiday, and he knew lots of people and loved playing with musicians that knocked his socks off. And when the Goodman Band was traveling, they heard the pianist Teddy Wilson. And Benny was so knocked off, it was just, his socks were knocked off because of Teddy Wilson, and he wanted to work with Teddy Wilson, but racists. So he found a way to have Teddy Wilson be a special guest so that he could highlight Teddy Wilson and kind of turn the tables on the jerks that wouldn't let him be a member of the band. So Gene Krupa and Benny would come out on Intermission and play with Teddy and have this feature group. And then on radio broadcasts, they'd be like, and now the Benny Goodman Trio. And they would would come for Teddy Wilson, and his name was being said on the radio, and the racists could stuff it, as they probably always should, as they definitely always should. Anyway, the thing is, then they meet this guy when they're going through Los Angeles named Lionel Hampton. And Lionel Hampton, Lionel Hampton was a drummer here in Los Angeles mostly, and he had recently, I guess, not quite recently, but one of the things he was famous for was introducing the vibraphone on a session with Louis Armstrong on the tune Memories of You. And that was the first time they'd ever used vibraphone, which was a fairly new instrument. So he heard Lionel, and he's like, oh, we got to do that. Now that became the Benny Goodman Quartet. So they played together as a unit, and it inspired the crap out of Benny. Benny was just almost never happier than when he was playing in the quartet. Well, eventually, as things happen, all-star sidemen leave, and they end up starting their own bands. People like Harry James and Gene Krupa end up peeling off. Teddy Wilson ends up going to lead his own band. And you could tell Benny was not super inspired. And once Teddy Wilson wasn't there, he had to have a quintet because few piano players outside of Teddy Wilson could be a rhythm section just with their own left hand. And he was kind of feeling uninspired, and you could tell because he tried a bunch of different small groups live in 1939. None of them really were that great. Hamp was still there, and he still loved Hamp, but it just wasn't clicking. And then they meet this kid, Charlie Christian. And instantly, Benny is like so inspired. They're recording a bunch. They're playing all these new tunes. And that's why we have this thing here today, because Benny just absolutely adored Charlie's playing and was super inspired by it. This next song is something that is a very guitaristic thing, and I think Hampton gets credit for writing it along with Goodman, but Charlie's fingerprints are on this one as well. But one of the people that later claims to kind of have a big influence on Charlie, and I think that is disputed, but is definitely somebody Charlie was aware of and was probably doffing his hat to a little bit, was a guy named Eddie Durham. Eddie Durham was an arranger and trombone player and very pioneering solo guitar player in the swing era. He wrote for the Lunsford Band, he wrote for the Basie Band, and played in both bands. And he wrote songs that you're familiar with, things like Topsy. He was trying to feature electric guitar in 1934 before there was electric guitar. So he would have to go right up to the microphone and play. And there are versions of him doing that. And when you compare what he did with this acoustic guitar shoved up against a microphone to what Charlie did, you're like, oh, I can see why electric guitar made that work. And that was sort of the missing link that made it all possible. So the very end of this song is a little doff of the hat to Eddie Durham, who was definitely somebody that was an influence on Charlie, if not like a direct mentor. And so this tune is called The Till Tom Special. So that last little lick at the end is Eddie Durham's Topsy. So that's just a little doff of the hat to Eddie. One of the people that played a big role in Charlie's very short career was Count Basie. And you know, if you're just a casual observer of Swiggies, you might not be aware, but like Benny Goodman and Count Basie were huge mutual admirers of one another, and especially in the period from 1938 to 1941, they worked together a bunch. And so Basie is actually playing piano on a lot of the Benny Goodman Sextet studio dates that Charlie was on. And the next two tunes we're going to do featured Basie on them. So this next song is called Gone with What Wind, which I can only assume is a pun on the title of Gone with the Wind, which was a popular ballad at the time, and What Wind Indeed. So this tune is from 1940. Basie ends up recording his own version with his full orchestra. But I just wanted to kind of mention Basie because he's going to be very important in what happens when this version of the Benny Goodman Sextet runs its course and Lionel Hampton goes off to start his own band. But before we get there, let's go with some wind. I will mention there is one alteration in this tune. Everything we're doing, by the way, are like pretty much transcriptions of the original arrangements as the Goodman Sextet played them. But I wanted to just like go to town on a song. Like really go to town on it. And there's some great recordings of Charlie live at Minton's Jazz Club in Harlem from late in 1941. And it's very hard to do a version of those because they're literally just jamming. So this is sort of our little tip of the hat to the kind of longer format of Charlie Christian you got on those tapes from Minton's. So instead of having Benny get to blow up top, or in this case, our good friend Miles Prower Davis, I'm just gonna get to like play a lot of guitar up front. Is that okay? Okay, good. Much thanks to our friends on the dance floor for suffering through that extended length song. I very much appreciate it. Sometimes you just gotta go to town a little bit. But that vibe that y'all just created, that was sort of what the Benny Goodman Sextet was about. It was just about like Benny having these people that he loved that just like threw down. And Charlie was one of those people that just inspired the crap out of Benny, and we're all lucky for it. Up next for you, this is actually perfect. I had planned to play a different song, but I forgot to put it in the book. And I think moving on to this next song is actually the better choice, so lucky us. After that hot one, I think cooling it down is a nice way to go. Believe it or not, the Benny Goodman Sextet did play a ballad or two. One of the things that's unique to this era of jazz is that swing and really all of the jazz that came before bebop was primarily pop music. It was functional, celebratory pop music. And it was also art music, but like its job was to entertain everybody, and not just people that were hip to it or not hip to it. It was to make people jump, and to that end, you know, your ability to fill a dance floor was kind of like your, you know, way of getting to make your music, and that wasn't looked down upon. And I don't think at the time people really thought like it was an imposition. They were like, yeah, this is the job. Jazz began in New Orleans because in the 1850s, New Orleans had like the highest mortality rate of any city in the United States. And it was like this very great memento mori culture of like, well, if you're gonna die, let's have a party anyway. And so jazz is literally bands that you had to hire for parties because everybody was either getting born, getting married, or dying. And you were gonna have a party about one of them. And so those roots of jazz are really important. And to that end, as much as all of our modern day swing dancers just love dancing to like hot swing music, and there's a certain tempo that we all as social Lindy hoppers are used to, that's not actually what it was like back in the 30s and 40s. Back then, it was mostly square people on dates. Do we have any square people on dates here? No squares, great, perfect. But like, you know, they did a little bit of a foxtrot or maybe a little bit of a slow dance. It wasn't all jitterbugs everywhere. And so to that end, there were some ballads in there, and they were beautiful. So we're gonna play one of those ballads before we ratchet the heat level back up. So this is called I Surrender Dear. And it's funny, Benny, when he would play ballads, he pretty much always just like played the melody, let everyone else solo on it, and then took it out. And he just loved to just play a beautiful melody, let the band go to town on it, and then call it a day. This is another great example of him doing that. And the shout chorus on this is just this perfect little way of adding a little bit of like deliberateness to it. So it's not just jamming the tune. It's this little bit of a nice, beautiful thing at the ending. So here's I Surrender Dear. So yeah, that's what it was probably like for Charlie Christian to be in the Benny Goodman Sextet next to Benny Goodman. We got two more for you this set before we take a break. What's crazy is this band, this magic thing of like Lionel Hampton's riffing and just killer shredding, and then Benny Goodman's just amazing clarinet ability, and then a great rhythm section, and then Charlie's riffs, and all of it was great. But Benny had like really bad back problems. And so by the summer of 1940, he put the band on an extended break. The band actually went to Catalina Island to play at the casino ballroom there, and then went on a break thereafter. And that's when Lionel Hampton went off on his own. And we're going to do that whole, what happens after that in the second half of the show. But these next two tunes are the last things that the Goodman Sextet records before Hampton peels off. This next song is a little bit of Boogie Woogie, which was a thing that was, had been around since the turn of the century, but, kind of ebbed and flowed in the early parts of jazz and would kind of have fads and then kind of fall out of favor and come back. So in the late 30s, it was back again, and so there's a little bit of boogie in this. The important point to note is when I went to college at USC, I was a studio jazz guitar major. Oh, do we have some USC folks in the house? If we have some folks from the other school, I don't want any part of the rivalry. You can take it outside. It's just a college. I don't care. Anyway. But when I went to college at USC, I thought, it'd be fun. It'd be fun to be a studio jazz guitar major. And for anyone that's studied instrumental performance at college, fun's not the right word. Important, useful, okay, those are important words, but maybe not fun. But I actually had a 2-unit guitar class on the history of guitar, and I was supposed to memorize this solo. And I failed because I wasn't into this kind of music yet, and I sucked at learning solos. So I got a D on my college transcript in a 2-unit guitar class because of this song. Yeah, and look at me now. And so when we founded the Campus 5 back in 2002, it was one of the first things that we put on our first record, so I got that out of the way, and then I started later the Grand Slam Sextet. This is basically the Grand Slam Sextet that you're seeing right now. I have taken that mantle of that D from that 2-unit guitar class, and now we're at a whole concert celebrating Charlie Christian. So if not for that D, we might not all be here, right? We give you now the title song of the Grand Slam Sextet, Grand Slam. Many guitar players that were influenced by Charlie Christian would point to the recording of that song as one of the first times they heard Charlie. People like Herb Ellis would say that. Yeah, that's just like, that's some of the best stuff ever. One more time for Josh Colazzo on the drums, Riley Baker on the bass, Chris Dawson on piano, Craig Fundiga on the vibraphone, Miles Prower Davis on the clarinet. Now, ordinarily, I like to end a set on a hot one, but that's not where the chronology takes us. It's going to end us on a cool one. So we're going to cool down out of this. We'll take a nice break, and then we're going to come back hot and ready to go. But, and of course, I couldn't have taken these out of order for any reason. I have to do this chronologically. Of course, like, there are rules. What, you guys don't have the rules? But our good friend Jim Ziegler, who you're going to hear on trumpet, transcribed this to play with our Campus 5. And we've been doing so since, God, like 2004, I think. 2003. 2. Do I have a 1? Can I get a 1? Going, sold. This is one of those tunes that swing dancers all over the world absolutely love because it's got these great breaks in it. And the thing about this song is this is actually written over the bones of an old New Orleans tune called My Daddy Rocks Me with a Steady Roll. And the way that this is dressed up with these kind of like slightly sci-fi, my wife says it's like a science fiction song. But like it's got these certain intervals and it's just got Charlie's kind of thumbprints all over it because of that. So we're gonna play our last song of this set and then we're gonna take a short break. Again, my name is Jonathan Stout. Give it up for this fantastic band. Music of Charlie Christian, and this is our last song for this set. This is called Six Appeal. you all so much. My name is Jonathan Stout. Miles Prower Davis, Craig Fundiga, Chris Dawson, Riley Baker, Josh Colazzo. We're going to bring up Albert Alba and Jim Ziegler in the next set. We're going to take a short break. It behooves me to tell you that my trio will be back here on October 17th. So if you want to come on a Thursday night and check out the Jonathan Stout trio with guitar, clarinet, and bass, please feel free to drop on by. And if you like the great poster art that we had made for this, we've actually got posters for sale, so come on and see us on the band break. We'd be happy to send you home with one of those. We'll take a short break. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How we doing? Enjoying having a good time? I am. This is fantastic. And it's like a little history lesson all at once, too. I love that. And so just a reminder, Jonathan will be back with his trio on Thursday night, October 17th. So mark your calendars, get your tickets now. They're already up on at campusjax.com available. We'd love to have you here with us that night. And for you swing dancers, go ahead and check out our calendar. We've got a handful of swing events coming up, too. If you have stellar shows and concerts, they do at least 2 or 3 shows here every month. And it'd be great to have you out for any of those. But anyway, love what you're doing tonight. It's fantastic. Jonathan, love what you're doing tonight. Are we ready? Ready. Let's do it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for this birthday tribute to Charlie Christian. So, Benny Goodman was late for that recording session. So welcome back, Miles Prower Davis on the clarinet. So what happens in the summer of 1940 is Benny's back is really messed up, and he has surgery, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. But this lull, basically Charlie Christian is the only person in the band that gets put on retainer, and everyone else is sort of, you know, has to go their separate ways. But in the fall, Benny does reform the band. But in October, let's see, is it October or November? I know you guys are all keeping track. It's great. Of course. October 28th, John Hammond, the record producer who discovered Charlie Christian along with many others, suggested to Benny that he and Count Basie should join forces. And especially since Benny had recently disbanded his band, or at least temporarily, that was sort of in the air. And so on October 28th of 1940, they did an exploratory recording session where Charlie Christian and Benny joined members of the Count Basie band, with Freddie Green on guitar, Joe Jones on drums, Buck Clayton and Lester Young, and Basie himself, of course, and Walter Page on bass. But this was a big deal, just because, holy crap, talk about like, you know, two great tastes coming together. I mean, Basie and Goodman are two of my favorite bands of all time. But it also put Charlie Christian in a band for the first time in a recording studio with the great Lester Young, who was his primary idol and inspiration. So it was a big deal. And that song was called the Ad Lib Blues, because literally they were just making it up, waiting for Benny Goodman to show up on this session. Although that session didn't end up leading to a joining of forces between Count Basie and Benny Goodman, it did inspire the next thing that Benny did. Lionel Hampton, on the vibraphone, had gone off to start his own band, and he would have huge success with many great tunes, including his own version of Flying Home and its famous Illinois Jacquet sax solo. But Benny managed to wrangle away from Duke Ellington, one of Duke Ellington's all-star soloists, the great Cootie Williams. And Cootie Williams was sort of the second great plunger trumpet player after the great Bubber Miley in Duke's band. And he's one of my favorite soloists of all time. And basically, Benny managed to get him out of Duke's contract, and Duke gave him his blessing, and he joined Benny Goodman for a year and played both with the sextet and with the band. And that kind of shows the progress that things like the Benny Goodman Sextet had, because by 1940, end of 40, into 41, at that point, Cootie Williams was just in the trumpet section of the full orchestra, and nobody was really saying anything about it anymore. So he was able to have an integrated band, and that just shows kind of how far it had come in just that brief time. But he also played in the sextet, and just because Lionel Hampton was such a force of nature, he wasn't just replaced by Cootie Williams on trumpet. They also added a guy named Georgie Auld on the tenor saxophone, who'd been famous for playing in Artie Shaw's band. And so now Benny Goodman and his sextet became a thing. And as someone who named his band Campus 5 when there are 7 people in it, I can tell you that the numerology of bands and the Benny Goodman Sextet / Benny Goodman and his sextetness of it all is a challenge sometimes to explain. But there's a comedian I like named Jonah Ray who has this joke about, like, how many dogs is 3 dogs? So much more than 2 dogs. Like, you know, 1 dog into 2 dogs is already like 1 dog, and then times 2 is like, holy crap, and then 3 dogs, oh my God, we're having a party. It's insane. And the funny thing is, when you have that many more voices on stage, there's so many things you can do with that. So, you know, in our Campus 5, we usually have 2 horns, and when you add 1 more voice, it just adds what you can do. And I think the Benny Goodman and his sextet is a great example of that. So we're going to play this tunes from the second part of the Benny Goodman Sextet. And we're going to start with a tune called Holy Cats. And for those of you spelling this at home, that's WH So not sanctified cats, but rather total whole cats, not partial cats. Man, that's the first time that's ever gotten a laugh. Good. Oh, man. You're my people. I love you all. This was a tune, again, like it's got Charlie's fingerprints all over it, although he didn't get credit for writing it. But this was something that they recorded in a different key with that Basie octet. They tried to play it in C, and that was just a little high and shrill, so they knocked it down to G. And this became something that the sextet would play all the time. And I think it really shows what a great thing you could do, because it's a cool riff. People take some solos, there's some backgrounds, and that just adds a lot of texture. And then when you get to the shout chorus, Cootie's just wailing over this riff, and it's just so heavy and cool. And we're gonna have Jim Ziegler and Albert Alva added to the band. Give it up for them. So let's get down to some cat action, and here is Holy Cats. I think you see what I mean when I'm like, how many more horns is 3 horns than 2? So much more than 2. I just love the heavy metal heaviness of that stuff, man. Like they're just ripping, and that aesthetic is something that I love making sure gets represented in jazz, because it was there the whole time, and I think it can sometimes get forgotten, and sometimes it should be forgotten. But sometimes it gets forgotten when they should remember it. But going back to the history of jazz, the next tune we're going to do for you, and this is one of my favorite things to do, like when we play with our orchestra, is to play like different versions of the same song, because you get to kind of see how each arranger or each band leader shapes it. So this is a tune that like our big band plays, the Duke Ellington version from 1947. But this is what somebody might call a Dixieland tune, or like an old New Orleans jazz tune. It's called the Royal Garden Blues. And yeah, there we go. But I love this version because, you know, you can go to a theme park and hear a Dixieland band play this, and they might not be into it. They might be a little into it. You know, you never know. You can see, you know, folks in like red and white striped suits playing this. You can see the real jazz folks playing this. And then, you know, Duke played it. Like, everybody plays this song. But this is my personal favorite version of it. So here's what the Benny Goodman Sextet did in November 1940. It's called the Royal Garden Blues. When Benny was doing the Goodman Sextet, he really just loved playing familiar tunes and familiar song forms. So like half of the songs are blueses, half of the songs are kind of rhythm changes or Honeysuckle Rose or something, a very common chord progression. And I will say, trying to do the Charlie thing, it can be kind of tough to have to play yet another blues and be like, oh, I hope I don't repeat the same licks I used on the last one. But it's sort of a testament to just how great the band was that, like, take after take, live version after live version, every one of them is just like jumps and has a spark, and that doesn't ever feel duplicative. This next song is sort of a tip of the hat to Cootie Williams, who was honored by Duke Ellington with his own kind of concerto for Cootie. So sort of a backwards way around it. This one is called Benny's Bugle in honor of Cootie Williams. Well, I think after that one, we have to cool it down a little bit. As somebody who spends most of his professional musical life being a swing dance band leader, not just a guitar player, it strikes me the commonalities between like modern electronic dance music and swing music. And so when I heard Miles tearing into that last long build, I was like, oh, that's DJs call that a riser. So all of you folks, if you wanted to know about modern electronic music, that's what that is. Because that's what you came for. I know. We'll talk about the history of house versus breakbeat. We'll get into that later. But we're going to cool it down and do a tune that the Goodman Sextet recorded next in December of 1940. This is maybe kind of my favorite, like, I always play this song, and it's one of the most obvious kind of tunes in the kind of trad jazz book, but like I love the way Cootie Williams phrases the melody on this. We're going to feature Jim Ziegler on the melody statement of this and get a little bit of Albert Alva and Miles and myself and Chris all get to play a little bit of a solo on this. But I love the way that they made these little perfect arrangements that everybody gets their little bit, and there's a nice little arc to the way the order of the structures is the order of the solos is structured so that it's sort of like a nice little journey. So we give you now from December 1940, I Can't Give You Anything But Love. I Can't Give You Anything But Love. Up next, we're going to do a tune called Gilly, and this was named Gilly after one of Benny Goodman's daughters, and its other name is Gone with What Draft, because as though Gone with What Wind wasn't an asinine enough title, we had to have the follow-up, Gone with What Draft. But it just reminds me that I kind of like Charlie Christian, right? And when we were having our son, the thought of what to name him came up. And so, just like Benny Goodman wanted to name a tune after his daughter, I wanted to name my son after Charlie Christian. And thankfully, my wife let me. Do you want to know something that I found out recently that's kind of a bummer? Not like a bummer, like an actual bummer, but like one of those things where you tried your best and you're like, oops. I recently found out in Dr. Wayne Goines' book that Charlie preferred Charles. And our son is definitely a Charlie, so that ship has sailed for him. But we have a policy of trying not to dead name people because that's rude. But Charlie Christian was actually preferred to be by Charles, and I think it was Benny that really stuck him with the Charlie moniker. But occasionally, when he was announced on the radio, he would get Charles. But anyway, I love Mr. Christian, however you address him. It's so hard. I named my kid that. I'm stuck. But anyway, this tune, Gilly, is another way that the Goodman Sextet would get to just jam on familiar tunes, because this is just Honeysuckle Rose with some new riffs added. In the middle of this, is it? Yeah, I'm right. Okay, good. I didn't want to make sure I goofed which tune is which. But in the middle of this, there's kind of a little guitar interlude. And it's another tip of the hat to Eddie Durham, one of the people that Charlie must have looked up to, because to have usurped this whole passage, interpolated, to have interpolated this whole little section would be kind of impossible. But he basically took this from the Jimmy Lunsford version of Avalon, recorded in 1934, that Eddie Durham arranged, and Eddie Durham plays this guitar interlude on that song. So it's another little tip of the hat to Eddie Durham, kind of the godfather of trying to amplify the guitar. So let's play some Gilly. Hat tip to our friend Lauren Gould from Austin for having transcribed that for me. This next tune, along with Royal Garden Blues, is on loan from our dear friend Michael Gamble and his library. This next one is just another blues. But again, the way that the Goodman Sextet just had so many different ways to dress up the same tunes with all these different little fun bits, little send-offs, little different riffs, changes of texture. I love it. I love it. So like the head of this song is not a blues, but then they blow on the blues and then they come back to this. So it's a great little tune. And the string of unbroken puns in these titles. Six appeal, get it? 6 strings on the guitar, 6 appeal. Gone with what wind? Gone with what draft? And now we give you breakfast feud. The groan was appropriate. You're welcome. So from January 15th of 1941, here is Breakfast Feud. As I mentioned, Benny and Basie were good friends, and so Basie ended up playing on a bunch of the sextet sessions. And this next tune from the same date, and obviously the previous one, Basie was on, along with Basie's drummer, the great Joe Jones. And I never really noticed Joe Jones on the last one the way that I noticed Joe Jones on this one, which is to say this is like prime killing Joe Jones. Not that there's any other kind of Joe Jones, but it's double extra noticeable on this one. But again, this is the way that Benny's sextet, and I'm sure with Charlie's input, finds a way to come up with a couple riffs, have just a little bit of an arrangement to make something extra special out of a tune, because this is just another one of those like really common traditional jazz tunes, but it's an iconic one. This is called "I Found a New Baby." So we're coming to the end of our show very soon. I know. I agree. I would rather just stay up here and keep doing this forever. It's kind of like a thing of chips that they put in front of you. It's like, do I run out of chips or do I just eat these until I die? Because I'll probably just eat them until I die. I would rather stay up here forever and just do this. But we've got two more tunes for you. By the spring of 1941, Charlie was starting to get a little bit sick because he had tuberculosis, and diseases suck. I don't recommend them. But he was also like really burning the candle at both ends, famously going to Minton's to jam every night and stay out super late and basically like doing all the things that you probably shouldn't do if you have a really deadly communicable disease like that. But Of course, thankfully, they documented a lot of that, so we got to hear his endless hours of jamming. But there's 2 more tunes that he did with the Goodman Sextet that I want to play for you all. This next one is called A Smooth One, and this is another kind of, it's not quite a contrafact because the bridge is different, but it's very much similar to Love Is Just Around the Corner. But again, with its own riff and its own little magic to it. So from March of 1941, this is A Smooth One. I should mention that our good friend Albert transcribed this, and I've just merely recopied it over the years. And I'm lucky that I've been playing this song with Albert and with Josh Colazzo since 2002, because my first professional playing experience was in Josh Colazzo's band, the Feet Warmers, and we played this song as transcribed by Albert. And so I'm grateful to both of them individually and communally for all of these years of amazing stuff, and I've learned so many things from both of them. Not least of which is the minor seconds of this intro. So enjoy the dissonance. So it's time to play our last song for you. Well, you know, if you feel that way, you can tell us after this next song. I think that's a really great thing to do. After this next song, tell us how much you want another song. There's a social contract that happens, you see, between an audience and a band, and you'll find out. Thankfully, Shiri already knows. But this is the perfect opportunity to bring up Craig Fundiga back to join us. Because this song is one of the last things Charlie Christian recorded with the Benny Goodman Sextet, but he'd actually recorded it with a different title back when Lionel was still in the band. So there's both versions. So I figured, what a great way to close out the thing. Bring everybody back on stage and do a tune that was done by both versions of the Benny Goodman Sextet. This is called Airmail Special. But before we play it, give it up for this fantastic band. On tenor saxophone, the heart and soul of the Campus 5, Albert Alva. Of course, the mysterious mouth of mystery himself, Irvine's own, on trumpet, Jim Ziegler. One of the proudest sons of St. Louis around. And of course, you can't do anything that involves Benny Goodman without a slaying clarinet player. And I'm pretty sure that's an apt description. Miles Prower Davis on the clarinet. Holy crap. Of course, one more time on the vibraphone, Craig Fundiga. Because you can't do a band that has Lionel Hampton without some slaying vibraphones either. And of course, the best rhythm section in the game. That's Christopher Dawson on the piano. Sometime I would love to do just a regular Grand Slam Sextet gig, because we have a band called the Grand Slam Sextet where we do all of the vibraphone half of this stuff, and then all the tunes that Benny did with the quartet and the trio. So like on those tunes, the bass player and I will go have a beverage. By the way, if you haven't had a beverage, please get another one. But it's a great thing to do. So, and we get to feature Chris on Teddy Wilson style piano on that, which is always a treat. And then on bass, the triple threat himself, the only person that's played drums, trombone, and bass in all of my bands. Give it up for Riley Baker. And of course, the person who makes the car go boom. On the drums, Josh Colazzo, the one and only. If they make better swing drummers out there, I still haven't found one. And we're so lucky we get to have Josh. So we're going to play our last song for you. And like I said, this was recorded in... I have the thing. Yeah, I know, it says 41. I was trying to be more specific. Anyway, here's the thing that's sort of crazy. Charlie is, quote unquote, discovered. I think we all know what the asterisk there means, that's kind of a silly word to use, but that's the word that people often use for that. But was discovered in August of '39, and by June of 1941, he's taken sick, and that's it. So that's barely 20 months. But just a revolutionary impact, because one of the things you might not know, because you weren't there, and neither was I, but I was told, you know, in the early part of the 20th century, the difference between country, jazz, blues, etc., was very little. They were very, very similar, and they were related, and a lot of people played all of them at the same time. I highly recommend checking out a podcast, because that's what you came to Campus Jax for, is podcast recommendations, I'm sure. But there's a podcast called The History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs. And there's a great episode they do about Cream's version of Robert Johnson's Crossroads, because it's an hour-and-a-half episode, and the first hour they talk about how the genre known as the blues, not the song form, but like the genre, comes about. And it comes about because people like Robert Johnson and Son House and Charlie Patton were entertainers and they played lots of different kinds of music, but record producers just wanted to hear that one particular thing they did, and then that ends up kind of eating its own tail, and eventually people start just making music in that genre by itself. And so there's a lot of overlap. And so Charlie Christian was in Oklahoma City. There's no doubt that he was hearing bands like Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys and interacting with them and jamming with them. And they loved his music, he loved theirs. And you can hear like a lot of symbiosis going on between them. So I should also mention the first episode of the History of Rock and Roll in 500 Songs is on Flying Home, the song we started things out with. So it just goes to show I was right. Charlie Christian is important. I rest my case. I got to end it on this note, and then we're going to play a hot tune. But like, there's a story to tell, and we need to celebrate the story for what it is. Unfortunately, Charlie Christian gets sick with tuberculosis, and thankfully, he was. Benny Goodman paid for his hospital bills, and he went out to the Seaview Sanitarium on Staten Island, and unfortunately, he passed away in February of 1942. But the crazy thing is that his legacy lives on because there were people like Barney Kessel who had actually met him and jammed with him before he got famous, and then Barney Kessel ends up becoming one of the next great guitar players, and everybody that heard this playing on guitar was immediately blown away with it. Things like Grand Slam, Flying Home, Soft Ones, all these songs, they become like just the blueprint for all of the guitar that comes afterwards. And whether that's in the jazz world or whether in the R&B and jump blues and then eventually rock and roll world. So I'll end it there and say thank you very much, Charlie Christian, for all of your amazing music, and I'm so grateful to get to carry on that legacy and try and keep it alive. So this next song, again, it's one of those things where like I don't think Charlie Christian gets credit for writing this, but if you tell me a horn player wrote this bridge, I just don't believe it, because every horn player is like, oh, this bridge is a nightmare. But it lays okay on guitar, so it makes sense to me. But we play for you now our last song. My name is Jonathan Stout. Give it up for this band. Here's Airmail Special. Thank you so much. My name is Jonathan Stout. Greg Fundiga, Miles Prower Davis, Jim Ziegler, Albert Alva, Chris Dawson, Riley Baker, Josh Palazzo. Thank you so much. The music of Charlie Christian.
Let's hear it for Jonathan Stout and this amazing band. So good. So good. What a night. Thank you so much, guys. So here's the deal. I think they might have one more in them, but they're gonna need a little encouragement. Here we go. So bring it on up here and let's hear one more from these guys. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. You guys have, in fact, followed the social contract by clapping rather loudly at the end of the performance. So loudly, in fact, that you've given us the cue that you would like one more song. Well, it just so happens that I decided to play one song out of order. I know, there are rules. I was following the rules. I think several of our friends already know what song this will be. They obviously win the play-at-home version. But we're all here now, so that's great. Charlie Christian was one of the great improvisers of swing, and he had these great improvised solos. But one of the things I love about Charlie, and also about Cootie Williams, is they had a knack for when they came up with like a really cool solo, they'd play that cool solo. And if anyone's ever heard the alternate solos to Stairway to Heaven, I think you know what I mean. When you've got a really good one, stick with it. Because the other ones aren't as good. And so occasionally, Cootie or somebody like Charlie would have like a cool lick that they would play, and they're like, oh yeah, that's going in that song. And there wasn't anything like hacky about it. It was like, oh, that's a bop. I'm keeping that. That's what the kids say, right? A bop? Did I use that right? Thank you. As an aging millennial, I very much appreciate you helping me out with that. But occasionally, a jazz person will kind of concert a solo. They will write a solo for a whole song, kind of through composed. And so Charlie had this through composed chorus on Stardust that he would play. And there's a jam session in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the Harlem Breakfast Club that was recorded before any of the Benny Goodman studio dates in the fall of 1939. And it features Charlie playing two whole choruses of this through composed solo. Later when he joins, well, he's already in the Benny Goodman Sextet, but shortly thereafter on the broadcast, Benny is introducing, now you've all heard Stardust played by many bands, including our big band, the trio, and the quartet. But now, our newest discovery, the great Charlie Christian, we were jamming last night, and he played a chorus of Stardust that, well, it nearly broke up the session. So I wanted to share it with you. Benny Goodman was like a super aloof dude. As someone who's not necessarily neurotypical himself, I say that he was probably also neurodivergent in some way or another because he really liked the clarinet a lot. And so it took a lot for him to like recognize that other people exist. Not because he was like a mean person, but just like that's just not the way his brain worked. He was like thinking about the music all the time. So for him to sort of like wax rhapsodically about Charlie's playing that way and basically want to preserve it and play it for everyone else was a huge deal. When the first time we did one of these concerts was for Charlie Christian's centennial, and it happened to be the year that my son was going to be born. And so I had never gotten around to learning this Stardust solo. And so while I was practicing it over and over and over again, my wife was with child, and she would end up singing her own little lyrics to it. And the part where he quotes the song Pretty Baby, my wife goes, and I love you, little Charlie. So whenever I play this song, I think of both how much I love Charlie Christian and how great his music is, both hot and sweet and all of it, but also how much I love my son and my family. And so I can't wait to share it with you. Here's our last song. Thank you so much to Campus Jacks and all the folks here. Tip heavily. Get another drink before you leave if it's safe to do so. They make great mocktails if you need one of those. But thanks to all the folks here for letting us do that, and thanks to this extraordinary band, we now give you Stardust. Thank you all so much for joining us. Miles Prower Davis, Jim Ziegler, Albert Alva, Christopher Dawson, Craig Fundiga, Riley Baker, Josh Colazzo, myself. Wish you all a great night. We hope to see you again soon. I'll be back here with my trio on October 17th. We've got posters for sale, and we hope to see you again next time. Cheers, everybody.